Morning.
Good morning.
Mayor Dyer, Mayor Pugh, thank you so much for joining us. You know, what we're really here to discuss today is what it takes to make change at the community level, the local level, and the national level. And each of you lead a city that experienced extraordinary tragedy and trauma in recent months. Obviously, the Pulse nightclub shooting and the events in the aftermath of the death of Freddie Gray. I want to start at a difficult place, is when you are trying to bring back together a city after such an event that has kind of rent the fabric of the community. Where do you turn? I mean, what do you look to for government? What do you look to from the private sector? What do you look to from the civic sector?
So in my case, I had the good fortune that I had been the mayor for over 14 years at the time the Pulse tragedy occurred. So I had been in the communities and knew the various communities. It wasn't something that you could pull together just on June the 12th if you had been working in the LGBT community, in the Muslim community, in the Hispanic community up until that point. And one of the things that we did was we wanted to set the tone for our community in the first couple of press conferences when we came out. And when you have an event of that sort, it benefited us a little bit to have it in the middle of the night so that there wasn't a lot of social media all going on before we could figure out what was happening and be able to tell the public. So when we came out the first time, we had a clear understanding of what we wanted to do. We wanted to give concise, accurate information. We wanted to instill calm, and we wanted to tell the public we've got this. And we also wanted to set a tone on how we were going to respond. So our kind of mantra coming out was we were not going to be defined by the evil, hate-filled act of a demented killer. We were going to be defined by how, as a community, we responded. And that was with love, with compassion, with unity. And I've come to learn a lot about terrorism events after the fact that I didn't know. And fortunately, intuitively, we did some things right. But what I've learned is a lot of communities will respond with fear if they don't know why and what has happened, or with hatred and anger towards the bad people that did the bad things. And I'm proud of our community that we were able to respond differently than that.
What were the resources in Baltimore, Mayor Pugh?
Well, let me just say it was sort of different for me because Freddie Gray actually happened
before.
not far from where I lived, and I was in the state Senate.
Right.
And so I immediately went to the streets during the Freddie Gray incident and was there every single day to sort of kind of bring the calm. Because what was happening, and I said this on national news, is that what people were seeing nationally was a microcosm of America. Neighborhoods and communities that had been neglected for decades under various leadership. And communities that even if you cried out for them weren't getting the help. And so I remember when I was inaugurated on December the 6th this past year, and I said, for example, in that neighborhood, 1563 North Fulton Street, if we were standing in any other neighborhood, a burnt-out church for over a decade, it would have been torn down by now. Well, that church is now torn down. And it was an example of the neglect that had taken place in that part of the city. So as I've become the mayor in less than 120 days in office, we've begun to focus on some of those communities specifically because we know that they've been neglected. For example, a baseball field where communities where Section 8 housing existed, and people would actually bring their lawn chairs and pull out to that community and sit there and watch their children play baseball and football. But they would mark it with orange cones because nobody had marked that field. We didn't have that kind of respect for the community. And what I say, oftentimes, especially to developers and folks who are helping to develop our city, because you can come and see just wonderful, beautiful neighborhoods. Neighborhoods like this also deserve the same kind of respect, because what people don't understand is that inside of many of those neighborhoods are people who've lived there for decades, who own their homes. They may not be worth as much as the ones on Roland Avenue or down in Canton or other parts of the city, but they're valuable too. So they deserve the same kind of resources. So we're paying particular attention to those neighborhoods. Like when I introduced a lighting project in Baltimore to create more light around neighborhoods in our city, and people would think automatically that we're just going to go down into the downtown area. Well, that part of the city is one of the focuses of our neighborhood lighting project, to light up the neighborhood, fix up the fields, give the same kind of respect, regardless of what your income is. People pay taxes and they deserve that respect. So being there as a state senator and now being there from the pulpit of a mayor makes a big difference in terms of how your department heads react, how your community responds, and how you lead.
I want to ask you about the balance between the things you do directly as a mayor and the things you try to catalyze as a mayor. The famous saying, we think of mayors as a very hands-on, rubber meets the road kind of job. The famous saying is there is no left or right way to pick up the trash or to pave the streets or to ensure that there is adequate police protection. And those are all services that are directly under your control. But a lot of what mayors seem to do now is also try to organize other forces and institutions in a community, the business sector, the civic sector, to kind of change the trajectory of many different challenges, whether it's economic or social. And I'm interested in, as you've been doing this a while. What is the balance in terms of impact between the things that are direct, that you press a button and something happens, and where you are in essence trying to lead a network or build a network to get things done?
I think they're intertwined, and we like to say in Orlando that we're not the capital of Florida, but we are the capital of collaboration. And we've had a lot of success in the last decade because we've learned how to partner together, collaborate together across party lines. There's really no party lines at the local levels, as you suggested. I listened to your last panel, and I was thinking, as they were talking, everybody in Orlando and Baltimore want their local government to be successul. It's not, I don't want them to win because I don't like that policy. They want us to win every day because we affect their lives every single day, whether it's picking up the garbage or fixing the potholes or keeping them safe. But the mayor has a singular voice. You're the person that can set the tone for a community. You can convene. That's one of the things that you have. So I try to use that by creating a vision and bringing people to that vision, but then letting them work it themselves, not micromanaging things. And we've had a great success in being able to collaborate together.
Let me follow up before bringing Mayor Pugh. After the Pulse shooting, you set up the One Orlando Fund, which raised millions of dollars for the victims and their families. It was not the city dollars, right? You were bringing in. How did you build the coalition to do that, and how does that reflect kind of your broader sense of what it takes to get things done?
That really happened organically. When you have an event like Pulse, we train a lot on emergency response, and we do a lot of hurricane preparedness, but we also do a lot of on-the-ground and tabletop exercises related to active shooter. And after Baltimore and Ferguson, we did a couple of civil unrest exercises that taught us a lot about how to communicate with social media and things like that. But in terms of the One Orlando Fund, we had no experience whatsoever in how to create a fund like that and then how to go about distributing it.
So where did you turn first?
We reached out to a guy named Ken Feinberg, who administered the New York Fund, the Boston Fund, I think any significant fund that has been out there, and he guided us through the process. We set up a board that was the right board to make those decisions so that everybody trusted the decisions that were made. And Ken told us at the very beginning, nobody's going to thank you for this. There'll be more complaints, and as it turned out, it was the smoothest process that I could have imagined.
Mayor Pugh, what is, as you have been in office, what do you see as the balance between the things you do directly and the things you try to catalyze to happen?
Well, I use the bully pulpit often.
You do?
Very well. In fact, I'm always organized. I hold breakfasts on a regular basis in the mayor's office in my executive conference room. I convene business leaders. I convene heads of companies and corporations. I convene the universities to talk about how we collaborate. And my staff's introduction to me was to take a bus tour of our city so that I could have them understand my vision for us working together. I do the same thing with companies and corporations because, for example, we created a fund for young people to work. The city couldn't fund 12,500 jobs for young people. It just doesn't happen. So I call myself the ultimate cheerleader for our city. I was a cheerleader at Morgan State University. And so I became I consider myself the cheerleader for my city. So people know that I come from a business background, so I'm always looking at everything from a business perspective. So I need everybody in the room. I've even convened a meeting with all the philanthropic groups. I said, now I know you all are used to doing what you do, but let me just tell you, I intend to lead my city. So I need you all to get behind the vision so that we can focus on neighborhoods and communities that have been neglected for decades, organizations who don't have access to you. We're teaching community groups how to develop their CDCs so they can get access to money, but also the same thing with the community groups and organizations and the individuals who have nonprofit activities, but everybody's not coordinated. So I use my bully pulpit as the mayor to convene, to orchestrate, to organize, and to vision what I want my city to look like over the next
So
decade.
in that network, where do you find it most effective and useful to partner with community-based groups? What can they do that government can't do?
Well, part of it is organizing them, for example, through community development corporations,
right.
organizing them so that they can get access to partnering with other developers so that they can gain access to federal dollars and local dollars to change the complexities of their neighborhood. For example, as a state legislator, I was able to bring back I think it's $7 million just for tearing down neighborhoods. Well, we can also create jobs and opportunities for people who live in those communities. So giving them that access as well. So I just think it is the role of the mayor to lead and to collaborate, which is one of my favorite words. My cabinet always says to me, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. That's a word that Mayor Pugh uses often. Getting the private sector to collaborate with the public sector and with community groups and organizations. Now, can I just tell one really quick story? I was cutting the ribbon for Center Stage, beautiful theater in town, beautiful theater. And a gentleman walked up to me and he said, isn't this beautiful? He said, this is the new Baltimore. You're the new mayor, new energy for the city. And I'm looking at an audience that's 95% white in a city that's 67% African American. And I said, it is a great city. And he said, oh, by the way, tell me what happened to Sandtown, Winchester. Sandtown, Winchester is a small African-American community. He said, I was with Jim Rouse. We built 300 new houses in Sandtown, Winchester. What happened? I said, did you employ anyone from Sandtown? Did you train anybody over there to help build those houses? Did you create jobs and opportunities? And oftentimes what happens is that, those who have come into neighborhoods, come into communities, they've got the idea, they've got the solution, and they have the people. And they've not included the people who are in those neighborhoods, in those communities, in the process. And that's what I'm aiming to make sure happens in Baltimore.
To follow up on that, and I think I saw in the audience Neil Pierce, who is the dean of reporting on local trends and developments at National Journal for many, many years. So happy he is here. I grew up in New York in the era of
left New York.
I grew up in the era of New York, the era of Ford to New York drop dead, when cities seemed to be on their last legs. Now the story is something of the opposite. We saw in the last campaign the concern that metro areas are doing so well and leaving behind kind of the rest of the country that feels kind of isolated from the growth. The statistic that I love is that Hillary Clinton won fewer than 1/6 of the counties in America, and her counties account for 2/3 of the total GDP. There's a lot of job growth again in cities. There's a lot of economic vitality, but as Mayor Pugh said, there is a real question of whether that is reaching through the entire community, in particular, whether cities are equipping their own kids, particularly from low-income neighborhoods, to compete for the jobs that they are creating. And as we went around the country in that video and talked to mayors, that was the most common challenge that I heard. Yes, we are seeing economic vitality again in our city. We are creating jobs again, but in many cases we are importing the talent to fill those jobs. So I'm interested in both sides of this equation, Mayor Dyer. What is working economically in your city again, and to what extent do you feel that growth is radiating through all the communities of Orlando and Baltimore?
So we were positioned pretty well coming out of the recession. Two of our biggest industries prior to the recession were home building and tourism. So we took a pretty big hit, as you might imagine. But coming out of the recession, there's pent-up demand for people to take vacations. So we're now at 66 million visitors coming through Orlando last year, so that kind of led us back out of the economy. But we've diversified our economy such that some of the other areas, biomedical, high-tech, modeling, simulation, and training, didn't lose jobs during the recession. So in the last couple of years, we've been first, second, or third in overall growth and job growth in Orlando. Is it reaching the entirety of Orlando? So I would say yes and no. Unemployment's down in the 3-4% range. Are all the young African-American males at that same level? Absolutely not. One of the things we have done, and you have to take as many steps as you can, some are large and some are small, but we built 3 new community venues. So we built a new performing arts center, we built a new arena, and we built or renovated our Citrus Bowl. And we created a program called the Blueprint Program. And it was aimed at employing people that were from the neighborhood where the projects were being built, and it's the historically African-American neighborhood, ex-offenders or homeless individuals. It's been a highly successful program. We've employed several thousand people from that population, but more importantly, other companies partnered with us, so there ended up being more jobs created for that population in places like Publix or Walmart or some of the other things than actually worked on the projects. But we did a lot of job training, so there are people that now have construction skills out of those 3 populations that did not have that before. But we still have a ways to go. There's certainly a dichotomy with the economy booming again and who's being successful in that economy and who's not.
Your experience.
So 76,000 people unemployed in our city, 10,000 returning citizens every year, 3,000 people who are homeless. And I tell folks that when I was campaigning, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning and said, how do I get these people working? And so I waited till about 7. So I had this idea about creating mobile units and going out to the neighborhoods because people have no faith in government anymore. So they're on our corners, they're in our neighborhoods, and we've done every study you can possibly do. And what I've said to people in Baltimore, please, no more studies. I know where the highest unemployment area is in our city. I know where those neighborhoods are. And so at 7:30 in the morning, I called up a corporate exec. I said, I have this idea. I would like to take mobile units. I would like to create mobile units, go directly to those neighborhoods and get people working. I said, because they don't have faith in government anymore. I said, and here's my goal. I'd love to have 7 units going out every day into various communities with a goal of employing 10 people a day. So that's 70 people a day, that's 350 people a week, that's 14,000 people a year. Over a 4-year period, if all was perfect, we'd employ over 70,000 people. If we reach 20% of that goal, 25% of that goal, we change the trajectory of our city. And so I want you to know that I now have a commitment for about 3 of those units. And that's my goal, to go directly to the neighborhoods and communities, because people just don't have that faith anymore. We know where they are. You know, our University of Baltimore Neighborhoods Indicators Alliance tells us from 1 to 100 where the highest unemployment areas are. So we can target it, we can create the transparency, we can measure it, and people can see whether it's going to be successful or not.
And is it simply a question of convincing employers to look in a different place, or are there human capital issues and skills issues also?
Well,
you have to address it the other way.
Well, part of what the mayor already said, we're creating jobs. You know, we have the largest hospital, Johns Hopkins University, University of Maryland Medical System, biotechnology parks jumping up all over the place, all kinds of training programs going on. So the idea behind the mobile units is to download those jobs and opportunities, have individuals on those units going out and providing people with the information and helping direct them toward those jobs.
And the underlying growth, though, the underlying job growth is a more positive story than it was.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Tourism
What's
is
changed?
back.
What's changed? Why is it dynamic again?
Well, I think because, one, companies want to be near cities, and I think the data tells you that in the next 25 years, 75% of the population is going to be moving towards cities. And I tell folks, the only people who don't realize how important that is black folk. They're moving out while everybody else is moving in. So we've got to convince them that, you know, our cities are great places for all of us to live. Diversity is important. I tell people the greater the mix, you know, it's like a soup, the better it tastes. So we want everybody in. But it really is growing. Jobs are growing.
Right.
You know, we see it in our colleges and institutions, which I think is also another challenge for all of us. We've got probably more colleges and universities in Baltimore than almost any other state. I'm sure everybody has great college, but how we keep those individuals in our cities. The millenniums think cities are great to live in. We build an apartment building downtown. It's built before, it is even complete. So we've got to figure out what do we do to enhance our schools, to make sure that we got the greatest schools so that when they begin to raise their families, they find our cities attractive places to live.
That's still the challenge, right?
That is a
Convincing them to
great
stay.
challenge.
The dynamic, people who were here at the beginning and watched the video, we took this renewal series to a number of cities around the country, including Charlotte and Phoenix. And each of them are in a situation similar politically to yours, where you have a Democratic or progressive majority in the urban area that is pursuing a certain set of policies. You have rural areas that are becoming more conservative, more Republican, a Republican governor. This has been a pretty explosive combination in a number of places, with preemption questions certainly in North Carolina, which they are finally trying to resolve today. In Arizona, in Texas, the governor last week, Governor Abbott said basically there should be a system-wide preemption bill, not confined to any individual subject. If a city wants to do anything that conflicts with state law, by definition, they shouldn't be able to do it. What's happening in the relationship between your urban areas and the surrounding areas, and how much of this conflict do you feel?
I don't know it's much the surrounding areas, but in a lot of states now, there's a red legislature and blue big cities,
Yeah, right.
So there's some friction there, and it seems that the red legislatures are seeking to impose their will on the blue cities. And that's a tough thing to do, because the cities are the innovators. They're the laboratories. They're the places where it's not one size fits all. There's a lot of preemption talk in Tallahassee this year. And if you think about our state, it's about as diverse as you can possibly get. What works in Orlando does not necessarily work in Miami or Fort Lauderdale or Pensacola or Panama City. And it's just wrong to think you can impose one set of standards. One of the bills would preempt local governments from passing any ordinance that affects business regulation. Well, think how broad that is. I was thinking about it the other day. One of the small cities in our community was wanting to pass an ordinance that related to solicitation on street corners. Well, I could argue that solicitation, the guy that's panhandling, is a business guy outright, so that would probably preempt me from being able to do anything about panhandlers. And we were both in the state legislature,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize it at the time, but you become so much smarter once you pass into the state capitol than you were when you left your
It's the
city.
water. It's
I guess it
fluoride,
is,
yeah.
but I think we ought to, if you want to have a piece of legislation that'd be helpful to everybody, it would be you would have to have served in a local government post of some sort before you could be elected to the state legislature.
So
What do you
I
think?
was the majority leader of the
Yeah.
Senate, and one of the leaders around the minimum wage bill in the Senate. In fact, we passed our minimum wage bill a few years ago, but we gave companies and corporations a few years to get ready for it. And so we started raising it. It is on target now. We went from $8 now to July 1, we raised it to 9.25. Then next year we raised it to 10.10. Well, the city council came in with a bill they're moving towards 15, and so $15 an hour. And so, being a big proponent, everybody automatically assumed, because even when I was running, I think you're less smart when you're running for office than when you become that chief executive officer. So I said, yeah, I support $15 an hour, and I do. But I do believe that it should now, as one who is the mayor who's had to be confronted with, developing a consent decree that needed to be finished in 45 days, faced with a $130 million structural deficit for our school system, and we came to the aid of them. I had to veto the minimum wage bill. And I said, well, let me just be real clear. I'm not vetoing something that's not already taking place. We are on target. We will raise the minimum wage July 1. We will raise the minimum wage again on July 10th in 2018. And there is a bill at the state level. That's what he meant by when we're smarter.
Yeah.
There is a bill at the state level that we know is going to take 2 to 3 years to be heard. And your city council bill takes us out to 2024, 2026. And I would hope that anybody who's fighting for minimum wage now will be way beyond that by 24, 26. And so I said, you need to work with the state. And then I talked to all of my surrounding county officials, and they said, we're not doing it. So why would we put ourselves in a position that companies and corporations would start to move out of our city, even though it's projected way out? The connotation among most people is that if you pass that bill today, that their wages are going to go up tomorrow,
Yeah.
and that's in fact not the case. So we have a Republican governor who works really well with the legislature. I worked with him as the majority leader of the Senate. Other than our red line project, we've been able to work many of our issues out.
Let's bring
Can I
it,
just say
sure,
one
and I'm
thing
bringing the
to that?
audience after that, yes.
But cities are
that in.
competing for jobs,
Yeah.
and they're competing for talent. And we know what attracts talent to our particular city, and it's not what may attract talent to Baltimore or to Raleigh or some other city. And also, we're the closest, I know this is right to say, but we're the closest to the voters. And if I go to the grocery store, the voters are going to tell me whether I'm doing a good job or not doing
Or
a good
Facebook.
job. That state rep or state senator, they may not even know who he is if he walks through the
Right.
And as Mayor Roberts of Charlotte said to me at our event, it's not as if the cities are going to the legislature to preempt the policies of the smaller rural areas.
No.
Let's bring in the audience for some questions, if we could. Got a couple microphones. If anybody's got, Neil has a question. Neil Pierce.
I'd like to ask a question about neighborhood capacity and neighborhood development. When I was doing most of my reporting, 70s, 80s, and 90s in cities, community development corporations were rising up
Right.
and making a real difference.
Right.
How much of that impulse from neighborhoods is still occurring, and how much, if so, are the cities working with it? What are the possibilities there?
Well, I can tell you that when I look back the last 20 years, much of our development was toward the downtown neighborhoods and downtown communities. For example, if you were to go over to Canton, where they closed the firehouse because they didn't see growth over in that area, I know they wish they hadn't closed that firehouse because growth is just continuing to expand. But, some things have changed. For example, we now have what we call casino impact dollars that go directly to community groups and organizations. So what I've done is directed that monies toward community development corporations to help redevelop areas that have been neglected for decades. So what we're trying to do is partner with many of the community groups and organizations and enhance their efforts to focus on their neighborhoods. I have a saying, from Hilton to Milton, from south to north, east to west, all neighborhoods are important. So directing, the mayor can do that, direct monies in those particular areas, and that's what we're working on.
So I'm going to respond a little bit differently than that. We're kind of late bloomers. It's fun to be the mayor of a city that is basically I think of us as young adults.
You're
We're
adolescents,
past
yeah.
teenagers, but we're still young 20s. So a lot of cities are already set on what they're going to be, their trajectory. But I tell the people that come to Orlando, you're in the middle of it. You don't have to be third generation. You can come here and have an impact on anything you want to be involved in, and we're making our history. We're making what we're going to be right now. So it's a lot of fun, but we work as a region. The city of Orlando is actually only about 300,000 people out of the 3 million people in the region, and yet the mayor of Orlando has the total bully pulpit because there's no other large city.
Right.
And it's the counties, but we work together. So about 10 years ago, we got together and did a How Shall We Grow study, and every one of our local governments is now focused on urban infill, not to the exclusion of adding to the suburbs.
Including
but
some regional transport, correct?
we were one of 3 large communities in the entire country that had no form of local passenger rail, and we started a commuter rail system that will be 3 years old coming up in May.
And that's where Maryland differs, because we have the Prince George's County, we have the Howard County, we have the Anne Arundel County, we have the Harford County, and the Baltimore County. And that's why when you talk about something like minimum wage, and I tell people we're not separated by bridges and water, we're separated by imaginary lines where those populations have grown. Baltimore City is 620 some odd thousand, whereas Baltimore County right next door to us is 800 some odd thousand. Prince George's County, nearly 1 million. Montgomery County, nearly 1 million. So we have these big jurisdictions inside of Maryland. And so getting them to focus on the importance of the city, because we are the port city, and we are the ones where, I guess tourism is attracted, but you look at what's happening in Prince George's County, how they're building and attracting more people from the DC area.
Anybody else with a burning question? Up here, please.
Aisha Alexander with Kaboom. Mayor Pugh, you mentioned the importance of these community redevelopment efforts. And working in Baltimore after the unrest, something that a young girl that I was working with said has stuck with me. And she said that for many years they have been living in quiet despair. And when they finally had a moment, they exploded. So how do you make sure that they don't go back, the youth specifically, don't go back into that state of quiet despair and have a seat and a voice at the table?
Well, first, we've created a $12 million fund that's dedicated just to youth. We've created a youth commission that focuses on how that money is distributed. I've also created a youth commission that gets paid every month to come up with ideas and things that youth want to be about. We also have a regular youth summit that we're preparing for. So I think part of the issue is how do people get to what we have. You know, when I think about the new C.C. Jackson Recreation Center, that if I asked the average person in Baltimore, have you been, a lighted field, you know, a basketball field, a football field, an indoor swimming pool, outdoor swimming pool, and they just don't know. Under Armour's built a brand new recreation facility. Our libraries are now open longer hours than ever before. We brought back $20 million to Baltimore. So as I always talk to people about Baltimore, and just in terms of how we brand our city, it's not just for the tourists, it's for the people who live in our city. So many folks are in despair because they don't even know where the opportunities are. So let me just take a little quick commercial and invite everybody to Baltimore. Yeah. Starting on this Friday, Light City, for 9 days, where we are inviting people. And we took Light City out of the downtown area into the communities, into the neighborhoods. So a lot of great things are happening in our city. We've just got to make sure we're communicating it to young people.
I know we're waiting for what's next is kind of the highlight of the day of announcing the winners, but I don't want to let you go without asking one more question. President Trump was someone who was elected with very little support in urban metro America. As I mentioned, Hillary Clinton won 88 of the 100 largest counties in America, which I believe is an all-time record, certainly since 1964. As you look, but it was extremely popular outside of urban America, and we had this very stark divide. As you look at the agenda that he's putting forward on the budget, on issues like sanctuary cities and immigration, potentially on infrastructure, where are you optimistic about the direction they're headed, and where are you most concerned?
Let's be optimistic about infrastructure. He talked about a $3 trillion, or maybe it's $1 trillion.
Yeah, $1 trillion.
$1 trillion infrastructure bill of some sort. I still don't understand exactly how we're going to go about doing that, especially because his budget, when it came out, cut the rail fund. So it's kind of
take away the left hand.
Well, it's just not walking the walk, right? So, but I'm going to continue to be optimistic there. I don't know how we're ever going to get D.C. back to where we're working together for the good of Americans, and that's what is happening at the local level. Is people don't care who the Republicans and the Democrats are. I try, quite honestly, to stay out of some of the national political fray. After Pulse, everybody was on me about going and doing gun control measures, and I said, no, that would diminish my ability to help my city heal. So I try to be very active in the things that I can actually have an impact on, and then let the others argue about the other stuff.
So President-elect Trump came to Baltimore when I was Mayor-elect Pugh, and I made arrangements so that I would be the only elected official who greeted him with my letter in hand around infrastructure needs for our city. And what I said to him, because when he stepped out of his car, he walked up to me, I said, welcome to Baltimore, President-elect Trump. I'm Mayor-elect Pugh. He said, I know. I said, I have a letter to give you. He said, yes, and I'm authorized to take it. I said, it is around infrastructure needs for our city. I just want you to know that when you talk about infrastructure, we're under a federal mandate to fix our water system, so we can use your help there. We've got a tunnel that needs to be fixed, and so you'll find that in the letter, as well as the I-95 corridor, and I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, all right. Well, Mayor, and what was the...
And I'm on the Hill today about infrastructure needs.
Mayor Dyer, Mayor Pugh, thank you both very much.